Hey, friends, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm glad that you are either with me live or watching the replay. Today's conversation is a follow up on this week's episode of the Driven Woman Entrepreneur podcast. And we are talking about the very exciting subject of how we deal with expectations. How we deal with expectations at work in particular, because work is where so many things go sideways, and we either blame ourselves or we blame our boss or we blame our assistant, we blame our team member, we blame our clients, when actually there's an easy fix by understanding how we deal with expectations, other people's and our own, and how we deal with the expectations that other people have, our clients, our team members, our prospective clients, colleagues, and so forth. A part of my coaching framework, the Boss Up Breakthrough, is based on the tremendous wisdom of Gretchen Rubin through her amazing book, course, and all the rest called The Four Tendencies. Now, because I'm a former therapist, I am always going to be attracted to any kind of personality assessment or anything having to do with understanding ourselves better and using that knowledge to better ourselves and our lives. The Four Tendencies, I guess you could call it a self-help book or a personal growth book. But what I've gained from it is the understanding that when we want to achieve things, when we want to perform better, whether it's in our work or in our relationships, understanding how we deal with expectations is such a critical piece. I hear so many women refer to themselves as perfectionists or procrastinators or people pleasers, those three, which I happen to call the unholy trinity. I hear so many women refer to themselves as having imposter syndrome, imposter complex, imposter issues, or having that fraudy feeling. I see so many business owners who are frustrated with themselves as leaders because they don't feel that they are managing their team well. They don't know how to motivate and inspire and lead the people who work with them or for them to perform at their best. But sometimes what they need to know, and it's just right outside their awareness, is that understanding how people deal with expectations, what they expect of themselves and what they expect of others, is a crucial piece to leadership. Whether you want to make more sales, whether you want to have a more high functioning, integrated team in your business, or whether you are simply frustrated and confused about why you don't seem to be able to get yourself to keep your promises to yourself, whether it's working out, meditating, having a morning routine, reaching your sales goals, or anything else, but yet you seem to be able to do what other people expect of you. See, that right there is one of the tendencies. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not Gretchen Rubin. I did not write the book, The Four Tendencies. And I'm sure there's lots more I could learn and understand about this framework. But the way I use it in my business is to understand the most effective way to guide my clients to reach their goals based on their expectations. It also helps me manage my team better because I understand how they deal with expectations, each of my team members. And I use it as part of the screening process with determining whether I'm going to invite a person who schedules a consultation with me to become a client or not. Because how people deal with expectations is it really helps me understand whether they're coachable or not. So if you're completely unfamiliar with the 4 tendencies framework, let me give you a basic overview. According to Gretchen Rubin, there are 4 basic tendencies that individuals have, one of them as a primary tendency in how they deal with expectations. And there are inner expectations and outer expectations, or we could say what we expect of ourselves and what others expect of us. So I'm going to start with the largest group. 42% of people, according to Gretchen Rubin, and she does quite a bit of research for each of her books, unlike many in sort of the self-help, self-improvement genre. She puts a lot of research into her books. So I rely more on well-researched, evidence-based frameworks than those that they may be brilliant, they may be absolute genius, but they haven't been researched. So I tend to trust those a little bit less. And that probably has something to do with the fact that I spent 20 years in an academic setting. Anyway, I digress. 42% of people, according to this framework, are what are called obligers. Now, you don't have to be an enthusiast of the 4 tendencies framework to be able to figure out quite readily what an obliger is. An obliger feels obliged, obligated, compelled sometimes to meet the expectations of others. Obligers, thank goodness, are the largest group of humans. 42%, that's quite a majority based on this framework. And in my not so humble opinion, I think obligers are literally what holds marriages and families together, what helps societies run, what helps culture be stable, and what most businesses depend on. Because think about it. If most people were not primarily motivated to meet the expectations of others, the expectations other people have of them, there would be complete chaos. The opposite, I guess you could say, of obligers are rebels. Rebels do not do what is expected of them, and they often don't do what they expect of themselves. I would think it would be painful to be a rebel, although in many cases, rebels are responsible for a lot of innovation. Let me say a few more things about obligers. Obligers are excellent at meeting deadlines, at doing to the best of their ability what others expect of them, and others may be friends, family, romantic partners, neighbors, their religious community, their boss, their coworkers, their colleagues, their clients. Obligers excel at, to the best of their ability, meeting the expectations of others. Now, of course, there's all kinds of range in this, and it's not always healthy, right? Because sometimes we are internally motivated to meet the expectations of others, even when we don't respect those expectations or they're not in alignment with our own core values. That's painful because if your tendency as an obliger is to do what is expected of you, but you think your boss lacks integrity or they are motivated by values that are the opposite of yours, that's going to be a painful situation for you because you're going to do what your boss tells you to do, but you're going to feel really conflicted about it. So some of my advice for obligers is I think you owe it to yourself to be employed in a situation that's a good fit for your values, to work with and for people who are more or less in alignment with what you think is important. And when you don't do that, you may excel. You might be employee of the month. Hey, you might even be employee of the year because as an obliger, you are going to meet expectations. But if you are, thanks, Melissa, if you are out of alignment with your values, you are going to be meeting expectations that you feel conflicted about meeting. And that is a very uncomfortable, even painful situation. So, as an obliger, I think you need a good fit. And that means if you understand that you are the kind of person who always tends to do what other people expect of them, not necessarily what other people want them to do, but what other people expect. For example, obligers are people who would never cross the street unless the green man is blinking, even if it's in the middle of the night and there's nobody coming in any direction. Obligers tend to be rule followers. Obligers tend to do what is expected. They tend to conform to the norm. And conforming to the norm for some people may seem unnecessary. It may seem like and you see a lot of people on social media, particularly with respect to politics, referring to obligers as sheep. During the COVID pandemic, when people were instructed to wear masks, there are people who are rebels. You combine the rebel tendency, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, with the political landscape and maybe what someone's personal beliefs are about the vaccine and so forth. And they're going to be calling obligers sheep. You see the conflict there? So an obliger does what's expected of them. Now, if you lead an obliger, they can make your job very easy, but they do need accountability. They do need clear guidance. An obliger is delighted to do what you expect of them, but you need, as a boss, to be clear about what you expect of them. You need to provide them with some accountability because even if they really want to do what's expected of them, they might feel obliged to do what's expected of them by multiple different people. You're the boss, but maybe a coworker has asked them for some help on a demanding project or to pick up some of their overflow. Then the obliger is going to have some conflict about which obligation they tend to first. So accountability is really important. But where obligers really, really, really need accountability is meeting their own expectations. So let's say you've got a team member who is an obliger and they always perform to expectations, if not go beyond. They probably will go beyond. The best way to manage that person beyond what I've already talked about in terms of making your expectations clear, I would personally recommend that you recognize their service, their effort, their accomplishments, their results, their timeliness with deadlines publicly. Because obligers are very much influenced by what other people think of them. So if you are lucky enough to have some hard-working, high-performing obligers on your team, reward them publicly, acknowledge them publicly. Even if you have a virtual business and a virtual team, make sure other team members know how well that obliger is doing. And if your obliger is struggling with meeting their own expectations, let's say that they are able to meet your expectations as their boss really, really well, but they've mentioned to you that they really want to lose some weight or they really want to be more physically active. Maybe they are your virtual assistant and they spend most of their working hours sitting and they really want to start feeling physically better and functioning better because and you're going to want to applaud that because it means they'll do an even better job as your assistant. How can you help that person honor that commitment to themselves? What I always recommend to my clients that are obligers, and I take them through the assessment so they can figure out which one of these tendencies they are. I tell them you need to get an accountability partner. It might be enough instead of saying, I'm going to go for a run every day. It might be that they need a neighbor or a friend or a family member that goes running with them at 6 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Because chances are, because they're an obliger, they're going to be doing all kinds of things that other people expect of them and they're always going to put themselves last. So obligers' best trait is that they reliably do what others expect of them. They make great employees, they make great friends, they make great partners, and they rarely let other people down. They do tend to let themselves down on a regular basis because obligers, of course, prioritize doing what others expect of them. So if you have an obliger as an assistant or in another position on your team, or you happen to be an obliger, and you find that you are doing everything your clients expect of you and then some, but you're not honoring your promises to yourself, get an accountability partner. It will work wonders. Sometimes all an obliger needs is to pay for something, like hiring a personal trainer or getting a gym membership if we're on the exercise thing. But oftentimes that isn't enough. It's not enough personal accountability. Knowing someone is going to be at the gym, meeting them, or in the case of our runner, that person's going to show up at your house to go running. You're not going to let them down. But if you were running by yourself, you probably hit the snooze button. I think you get my point. So since I've already brought up the rebel, let's talk about them next. And again, because there are 4 tendencies, they are obliger, rebel, questioner, and do you know the other one? Okay, I'm going to tell you, but I'm going to tell you in a few minutes. So you keep listening because you're going to have all 4 of these people in your life. You're going to have all 4 of these people in your life. And of course, you're one of them, and you may not be either of the 2 that I've mentioned already. Rebels are the smallest group, meaning there are the fewest. There are fewer rebels than any of these other tendencies. And I think this is a good thing because while I personally respect rebels for being the disruptive elements they are, for, pardon me, for helping us all recognize sometimes we're stagnating. Sometimes our business is stagnating. Sometimes our leadership style is stagnating. A rebel, a rebel will be the person who will bring that to your attention because they will not conform to the norm. They will not do what is expected of them. In fact, oftentimes a rebel will do the opposite. If you have a rebel child, I don't have to tell you, until they are grown and flown, they are a challenge. If you have a rebel employee, that may be very challenging for you. If you have a rebel client and you're a coach or consultant, that may be challenging for you. Personally, I think a rebel boss is very difficult to work for. And it's very difficult to be that person because a rebel simply does not conform to the norm. They do not meet others' expectations. And I think what's particularly painful for a rebel is they often don't meet their own. Rebels need kind of special handling. And in many cases, they need a very individualized, customized approach. Because if you say, oh, I know how to handle these people, I have a system, I have a framework, this is how you do it, they'll find a way to not conform to your expectation. So if you are a rebel, you may be very difficult to coach. And you may have to figure things out for yourself. And you'll probably keep changing the goalposts because it's not that you intend to be difficult or you try to be uncoachable. These tendencies are baked in. They are hardwired. They are a combination of your genetics, your life experience, your native personality structure, and a whole lot more. But they are very difficult to change. So what makes a lot more sense to me is to accept your tendency and learn to manage it more effectively if it's getting in your way. So the rebel needs to figure out a way that they can do what they need to do in a rebellious fashion. I have not worked with many rebels because in my experience, most rebels don't hire help, even when they're struggling, even when they're floundering, even when they're failing, because it's their nature, it's their tendency to reject others' input. So I find often rebels need to figure things out for themselves. Next up, I'm so sorry about this raspy throat. The next group is the group that I happen to be a member of. That is the questioners. Now, questioners, maybe I'm biased. I'm sure I'm biased because I think they're the most misunderstood. Like an obliger, you know who they are. There's no mistaking it. They're the people who do what they're expected to do. They do it willingly. They do it joyfully. They go above and beyond with delight. They're not hard to figure out. Rebels are not hard to figure out. Like they're oppositional, maybe even militant, maybe even defiant. They literally have to go their own way. Questioners can be mistaken for rebels. Why? Because a questioner does not just comply. They do not just do what is expected or what other people tell them is important. In fact, a questioner like me will often say, why do you want me to do this? Or why do you want me to do it this way? Or why is this even necessary? Or have you ever thought about doing it that way? A lot of questioners become entrepreneurs, become self-employed in some fashion. Because being a questioner in most work settings is generally not going to make you employee of the year or the month or the week or the day. In most traditional workplaces, bosses, the big boss, is in the last group, which I'm going to get to in a minute. And when you have a questioner employee who says, I'm very happy to get started on that project, boss, but first I need to know a few things. Many bosses will be like, girl, just get to it. Get on it. Why are you creating all this unnecessary complexity, all this unnecessary delay, this unnecessary drama? Many bosses will perceive a questioner that way. But the questioner is more than capable of doing what's expected of them, and they'll probably do it better and faster than anyone, in my experience. But they have to really deeply understand the why of it. And because these tendencies are baked in and lifelong, most questioners have been asking a lot of questions ever since they were little bitty kiddos. These are the kids that were always saying why. And many parents, many teachers, many bosses will mistake a questioner for a rebel. They will say, like Nike, just do it. Why do I have to answer your questions? What difference does it make? Have we tried this other way? Why are you placing conditions on compliance? That's how you know you're dealing with a questioner, because it will appear that they are placing conditions on compliance, which delays the onset of them getting busy doing what's expected of them. I personally think, and again, I'm biased, that questioners can make excellent employees, especially in high-level positions, strategic positions, because questioners, in my not so humble opinion, more than any of the other groups, have excellent critical thinking and strategic thinking skills. They do not just blindly follow anyone. They don't just do something because somebody said so or because everyone else is doing it. As a matter of fact, when a questioner sees everybody going left, they will get curious about why no one's going right and probably go right just to see what's happening on the right side. So if you are a questioner, you need to hold space for yourself to maybe take a little more time to make decisions, to maybe need a little bit more time to commit, to get on board, to follow. This can make you difficult to coach, even though you need help, you want help, and you've hired someone to help you. One of the things that I have been told most consistently across my entire life, which I had many theories about why it was, but until I understood my tendency from this framework, I began to question if I wasn't just being difficult, obstinate, non-compliant. Now I understand that in order for me to lock on the goal, in order for me to commit to achieving the goal, it needs to meet my conditions. I need to understand it. I need to, in many cases, agree with it. And I need to believe it's the best course of action. And then I am all over it. Now, if you are a questioner like me and you are a solopreneur like me, you need a thought partner. And if you can get one as a biz bestie, you are their thought partner, they are yours. You're lucky indeed. I am very lucky to have someone like that in my life. I meet with every single week. It's my first meeting of the week on a Monday morning. My thought partner. Because I'm a verbal processor, I am a questioner, and I need to figure things out before I can commit to them. If you are a solopreneur, a coach, a consultant, a service provider, an independent professional, a creative, and you don't have a thought partner, it's entirely possible that you will make life and business much more challenging than it needs to be because of your need to question before you can commit. So one of the things that I try to work on and that helps me as a questioner, and I recommend if you are a questioner yourself or you are managing a questioner, make space for the questions, yours, theirs, but put a time limit on it. And require, I have to do this for myself, and require of yourself or that individual that you will hold space for the questioning, that you accept and respect their need to understand the why and the how and the why it's not something else before they can commit and start making progress. But you have to put a limit on it, or it could literally go on indefinitely. And if that person has any obsessive traits, perfectionistic traits, or ADHD, it literally could go on indefinitely. So to help that questioner move forward, make space for their questioning, because you will frustrate them enormously if you don't, and they may actually find it impossible to get started if you don't. But put a limit on it, because it could literally go on forever. The last group is the upholder. Now, it probably makes sense just from the name. An upholder is kind of like the standard bearer. You will find a lot of upholders running companies. You will find a lot of upholders in the military, in government, in politics. Upholders are people who are hardwired to believe that they are the best judge of what is to be done, and they do it. So upholders are very decisive. Upholders are often leaders because many people have a hard time making decisions, knowing what to do, taking action, getting started, moving forward, getting unstuck. moving past plateaus and so forth. Upholders aren't confused. They are clear as a bell. But upholders tend to always think they're right, intrinsically. Oftentimes, they do have a lot of evidence to back it up. I'm not saying they're impulsive or uninformed, but upholders believe they know what's best. They trust themselves implicitly and explicitly. An upholder is often a leader because they never doubt themselves. Upholders make great leaders of movements because they tend to be inspiring to people, most of whom are much less decisive. But an upholder can be an impossible boss for others. I think they are best paired in partnership of any kind with obligers. Upholder boss, obliger team member, employee. That works because the upholder is very clear about what their expectations are, and the obliger finds it easy to meet others' expectations. If you are an obliger, you are probably frustrated with the majority of humanity because the majority of humanity is not an obliger. So upholders tend to be very challenging to their children, to their spouses, and to their employees because in their minds, they know what needs to be done and they're always right. They don't question themselves. And they tend to get very frustrated when other people are rebellious or question. And you can see why. If you are an upholder and you have an employee that's a questioner, you will perceive them as a rebel, guaranteed. Even once you understand this framework, because if you are an upholder, it literally makes no sense to you that people don't just do what you tell them to. Like, you know what needs to be done. You've clarified what needs to be done. You've communicated what needs to be done. So why aren't they doing what needs to be done? I think one of the most difficult pairings, certainly in my experience, is whether it's a romantic partnership or a business partnership or a upholder boss with a questioner co-pilot. That will be a painful relationship. They may choose to stay in it, they may end it. But if the upholder thinks they know what's best and the other person just needs to do it, and they're partnered with, paired with, or supervising a questioner who is probably going to do an excellent job, may even do an innovative job, not only exceed expectations, but create future opportunities that go above and beyond what they've been asked. But because they need to satisfy their questions first, they will frustrate the upholder. So, as you can see from these descriptions, there is a lot of room for self-awareness, self-acceptance, and greater understanding and acceptance of others within the four tendencies framework. It's not the be all and end all in business or in relationships or in life, but it is a tool that I rely on to help me lead my coaching clients to greater fulfillment and success in their businesses. So I happen to have a handout on the four tendencies that describes it all really well and has a few questions for you to assess yourself and identify which of the tendencies you are so that you can function better in your role, whether you are a leader or an employee. I'm happy to share that with you. So after watching this video, if you'd like to reach out to me on LinkedIn at Coach Diane Wingert, or you can send me an email at Diane Wingert Coaching. Just visit my website, Diane Wingert Coaching, and I would be delighted to share it with you. Thanks for joining me for this conversation. I hope it has been as enlightening and inspiring to you as this topic has been to me. That's all for now.